All right, ANP1 students, in this video we're going to finish talking about calcium homeostasis. So let me go to our objectives. So in the last video we talked about why it's so important to keep the amount of calcium in our blood within a range, and we talked about where we get our vitamin D, and then we talked about what happens when our blood calcium falls below the normal range, so what our homeostatic mechanism is for that. Now, that was primarily talking about when our calcium in our blood gets too low. So the parathyroid hormone definitely had a role in that. That's when it would be released. And then its goal was to have an effect on our skeletal system or bones and our kidneys and our small intestines to get that calcium back into the normal range, increase it. Now, that's a more common problem, having, low calcium, either from not, intaking enough of it, or if we have medications that might interfere with getting enough calcium into our bodies, or if we have a hormone problem, whether it's with women in menopause or whether it might be with this particular hormone that's supposed to regulate calcium. Those are kind of common causes of low calcium in the blood. So those are more common than having too high of calcium, but it can happen. And so that's what this objective 28 is going to talk about, is the role that calcitonin, it's another hormone, has whenever we have calcium levels in our blood that are too high. All right, so let me go back to our textbook. So calcitonin is the name of this hormone. And again, remember I said whenever our calcium gets too high, so if there's some instance where we have too much calcium in our blood, then what will happen is, so I'm going to go back to our little picture here because I think they don't have a picture for calcitonin. Okay, so we could kind of change this whole picture. And we could show that if the blood calcium levels get too high, then what will happen is it's actually the cells that make up the thyroid gland, so not the parathyroid gland, but the cells, there's some cells in the thyroid gland that are able to serve as receptors, and they detect if the calcium gets too high. And if they see that the calcium's getting too high, then they'll serve as the control center, and the thyroid glands will release calcitonin. Okay, and then the calcitonin, just like the parathyroid hormone, it would get into the bloodstream, and then it would travel through the bloodstream and make its way to the effector organs. And so the calcitonin will have the opposite effect on those effector organs. So instead of promoting osteoclasts, causing them to break down the bone and release minerals, it's going to inhibit them. So inhibit just means to stop them or prevent them from breaking down bone. So what that would do is if the osteoclasts aren't breaking down as much bone, you'll get less calcium being released from the bone and less calcium into the blood. So it'll have an effect on the bone tissue, but instead of, again, promoting, kind of increasing osteoblast activity, it'll decrease osteoclast activity. Kind of try to keep the calcium in the bone at that point, since there's already too much calcium in the blood. And then the other thing it'll do, it'll go to the kidneys, and it will, we want to get rid of that calcium because it's too high in the blood, so it'll cause an increase in calcium into the urine, so we'll excrete more calcium into the urine. So those are the two effectors, so be the bones and the kidneys, that the calcitonin will have an effect on. So that would help to try to keep that calcium from getting any higher, and also hopefully drop it, more into the normal range. But generally this high calcium is generally caused by a disease that, usually needs to be corrected before to treat the problem. So usually calcitonin can't do it just on its own. But it does try to help out, so, which is good. All right, so that was our end of our calcium homeostasis. So in the next video, we'll talk about how our bones age, which we've kind of already talked quite a bit about through this chapter anyway. And then we'll talk about how our bones can heal from a fracture, and then we'll talk about different types of fractures that we want you to be aware of. So I will see you in the next video.